Okay, so this right here is a website that I've designed in Photoshop. Um, Everything's spread out upon its own layers and everything like that. And basically I'm just going to show you how to take something like this that you've designed in Photoshop and how to slice it and really quickly bring it into Dreamweaver and put each slice into its own div tag and control those divs with CSS. It's a pretty solid method. There's two different ways to do this. I'm going to show you both. One way is just to export the individual slices and call them in Dreamweaver that way, and the other one is to actually go in with the selection tool and select each slice and copy and pull them into Dreamweaver that way. So to get started, all I'm really going to do is start exporting slices. I'm going to assume this tutorial isn't to really show you how to design the layout in Photoshop. I'm going to assume that you have already designed something that you would like to bring into Dreamweaver. So actually doing the layout in Photoshop is a little bit beyond the scope of this tutorial. So I'm going to turn on my slices or my grids rather. And this is the basic slice layout that I've put together for this site. And I think it's important to note that this is a very symmetrical grid, and you have to keep in mind that when you're loading div tags into Dreamweaver, everything is going to be, all of the divs are going to be floated left with CSS. So essentially everything has to have a correct stacking order. And I'm going to go through here really quickly and explain the way these slices are laid out with the selection tool. And when slicing a site, I'll start with the top and just work my way down. And you just got to kind of, take a minute to visualize, all of your content and the way it's going to need to be laid out. For instance, the logo right here is going to need to be its own slice. Each one of these tabs is going to be a button, so they're going to need to be their own slice. This slideshow right here needs to be its own slice because that's it's its own object. And same here, you're going to want to be able to edit this box right here with HTML text. So this would need to be its own slice, and all the way down, each one of these buttons needs to be its own slice. So basically the way I've started with this is started with the top, and for instance this is going to be one slice right here. Okay, that would be one slice. This would be a slice, and again, like I said, the reason for using the guides is because it allows the selection tool to snap, and it makes it really easy to make selections for both the slice tool and the select tool. This would be a slice. Okay, you see what I mean, how everything is in a stacking order, because if all the CSS divs are floated left, that means this would be floated to the left and these would stack upon each other. Okay, so this would each be, so this would be its own slice. Okay, so that would be the second row. Then I would come down here and this would be its own slice. Okay, and then this entire section right here would be its own slice. Okay, see, that's why it's important to really lay out the grids in columns. You have this section right here. That would be that would be one row instead of not column but row. And then this would be a row, and this is a row, and it's all needs to be lined up like that. So it's something to keep in mind when you're designing your site, because you can't have slices that don't line up accordingly. So the first way I'm going to show you how to do this is with using slices and exporting the slices that way. So I'm going to turn on the slices that I have already laid out on this. Okay, and you can kind of see now how I've sliced this file. Okay, got slice 1, 2, 3, you know, and that's the stacking order. Everything is symmetrical, everything is in its own row. And what I usually do is I like to go through and I like to name each slice according to its page. So basically for this one, you double click on it, and for instance I would just use, let's say, home 1. And I would just go through and give each one of its slices its own name. That way when you're laying out the div tags, you know what I mean, you get a flow going. Home 1, 2, 3, 4, and everything just goes really quick like that. Just gonna go through here and quickly name these in a chronological order so it makes sense. You could, if you wanted to, you know, name them menu 1, menu 2, but just for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to quickly name these so that we can get to the Dreamweaver part. Count of where it was. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Let's see, number 11. All I'm doing is just with the slice selector tool, I'm just double clicking within the slice. And a good idea as well is when when we get into Dreamweaver, sometimes it's a good idea to, create a template for the way you want things, so that way, each page that you create, you don't have to go through and create div tags for each independent item, which can be a pain sometimes. I'm just going to give you the basic tools needed to do this. And I think once you wrap your head around this, it's really, it's pretty self-explanatory from there how you would, broaden the technique and apply it to your own designs. Because it did take me a while to figure out a really easy method to, designing something in Photoshop and getting it into Dreamweaver. It took me a long time to really find a good technique that worked well, because I knew it could be done. I've seen people do it all the time, and I just couldn't understand how they did it. So hopefully this alleviates some of that process of trying to find a good technique for you guys. Okay, so I've named all of them. I've got a total of 24 slices. Another thing that's important is when you're actually making your slices in Photoshop, it's a good idea to really get in there and check that you don't have slices that are not correctly lined up. Like for instance, if you had a slice like that, it just creates this dead space, and the reason why that is important to avoid is because when you bring it into Dreamweaver as a div, you're gonna have, it's not going to line up correctly because it's actually going to be a few pixels off. So what you just want to make sure that all of your slices are completely flush with each other. There's no spaces in between any slices. They all flow correctly. It can cause a lot of issues and a lot of headaches down the road if you don't make sure that they're correctly lined up. Okay, so I've got all my slices named in Photoshop. Everything's laid out. I've thought it out. I know how I want to do it. So what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to export all of these slices as PNG files. So I'm going to go to the File menu and Save for Web and Devices. Zoom out a little bit. I'm going to take the Slice Selector tool and I'm just going to select and hold Shift and select all of my slices. I could just select, export all, but I like to do it this way for some reason. It makes me feel more confident that I've got everything, I guess. Okay. So all of my slices have been selected, and you can use GIF, you can use J, you can use anything that you prefer. I prefer to use PNG 24. Okay. I'm going to go to Save, and I've created on my desktop a folder called Tutorial Test Site, and you want to make sure that you have in format, you want to make sure that you have HTML and images selected, and slices. See, I could have just gone to all slices, but I prefer to click on selected slices, and that way if you need to make edits and if you need to change just one slice down the road, I like to have it defaulted to that. That's just my own preference though. And I'm just going to call this home, and I'm going to save it right into my tutorial test site folder that I've created on my desktop. Go to Save. Okay. And those have been exported. Now, the next thing that I want to show you how to do is how to create a really simple rollover effect for a navigation window. And this is more just to show you the technique that I used. Basically, the way it works, these are obviously going to be the natural state of each button. So what I want to happen is when a user hovers over each button, I want it to have a little bit of a glow, and I want these icons to get just a little bit bigger, so it kind of creates an effect like that. So to achieve that, all I'm going to do is use a JavaScript behavior in Dreamweaver, which is really easy to implement. So basically, I would need a slice of each button as is, and then I would need a slice as each button in its overstate. So I've already done so. I'm going to my footer navigation layer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off this layer. Okay, so that's going to be the overstate. So now I'm going to go through here, and I'm just going to turn off the regular layer, and I'm going to turn on the over layer for each button. And all I've done to create that, I just added a little bit of outer glow to the icon. I duplicated the icon layer, added a little bit of outer glow, and I free transformed the icon and made it slightly bigger. That's all that I've done. Okay. So that's what they're all going to look like on their mouse over state. So now what I want to do is go to Save As again. Save for Web and Devices. And this is where that Save As, Save Selected Slices comes in handy. Okay, so now with the selector tool, I'm going to highlight just these slices, just the buttons. But what I want to do is I want to double click, and I want to give them an alternate name. Obviously, I'm just going to do an underscore over for each button. Okay, so that way I know that is the overstate. just want to shift and select all of my buttons. Make sure that it's set to PNG24 and save. Same folder. Selected image, selected slices. Select home again. It's gonna ask me, yes, I want to replace it. Not a big deal. The only thing we're really after here is the images anyway. Okay, so that's pretty much it for doing it with this method. So I'm gonna go ahead and go into Dreamweaver and get started with laying out this page. Before I do that, I'm just gonna go into this folder and get rid of all the stuff I don't need. I don't need this right here. Okay, so these are all the slices I just created. These are my button over effects. Okay. And this is what is really important to note. When I click on each one of these slices, the size is, the pixel dimension is really what all this boils down to, because each one of our divs is going to be set according to each one of the slices size, okay? And that's really what makes this method work. And I'll get into that in just a minute. Okay, so these are all set. We're ready to go into Dreamweaver. So in Dreamweaver, all I've done is I've created a site with no server or anything like that set up. It's just a test site. Very simple. Okay. So what I'm going to do, all of our images are already in there. So we should be able to just refresh. Okay. I've brought in my images folder into this directory so we can see those are all of our slices. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is click on the site, create a new file, and we'll just call this index.html. Double click it, go into design view. Okay, now the first thing I want to do is I want to create a div tag that is going to act as the site's container. Okay, and that div container is going to hold all of the other divs inside of it. Okay, so I'm going to go up to Insert, Layout Objects, Div Tag. I'm going to call this container. I'm going to create a new CSS rule, and it's important to come down here, and I'm going to create a new style sheet. Click OK. It's going to ask me to name the style sheet. I usually call it master. It's easy to reference that way. It's make sure it's in our site root. Click Save. Okay. Now when this window pops up, this is the CSS definition for the div that we've just created. And I want to go down to the box. And because this is basically going to be, the container that holds our entire site, the size, the width and height that you want to input here is, the total size of your Photoshop document. Okay, so to get that, you can go into Photoshop, go to Image, Size, and I've laid this out to a pretty standard size, which is 960 wide by 1000 high. Okay, so we're going to go back into Dreamweaver, put it 960 by 1000. We're going to float it left for now. And if you want your, obviously you're probably going to want your site centered in the web browser, and to do that, just go over here, and for the right rather, put auto, and for the left put auto. And what that is going to do is basically it's going to automatically set the same margin for the left side of the div and the right side of the div, which will result in the div being centered within the browser. Click Apply, click OK, OK. Alright, so this is what we're left with. This is our container div. Okay, you can delete that. And we've got our new, this is our CSS, this is our main CSS file right here. And so basically what we're going to do is we're just going to start at the top, and we're going to just work our way through with with inserting our div tags according to all of our files. What I usually do is start with, this is the reason why I chronologically named them. I'm going to start with home 1. Okay? Now, we're going to go to Insert, Layout Objects, Div Tag, ID, Home 1, New CSS Rule, and we want to make sure that when we're creating these div tags that we're always staying within our master CSS folder, or file rather. Click OK. Okay. Now, we're going to be using the background image option within CSS. So this is kind of the routine that I get into. I create the div, give it the new ID, new CSS rule. This window is going to come up. I'm going to go to background, select on the background image. I'm going to go to browse. I'm going to go into our images folder, set this to list, go to home 1. Okay. Now before I click OK and load that as the background, I want to take a note of this image's size. Okay, it's 960 by 48. Okay, so I'm going to click OK, go down to box width, 960 by 48. We're going to float it left. We're always going to float the div tags left. Create 0 padding, 0, apply, OK, OK, bam, there it is. Click backspace to delete the text. Okay, you see how this works? So now we have a div tag, and the size of it perfectly matches the size of that image. So we're going to keep moving forward, and I'm just going to click on going to hover over the outline of this div tag to highlight the red. Click it so that you get the blue circle that lets you know that div is selected. And I'm going to click right arrow once. And what that's going to do is it's going to take the selector to the right of the div, okay? So that way we want to make sure that we're always inserting the div directly after the last one. So again, you just want to make sure that you highlight the previous div, select right, okay? Insert, layout objects, div tag, home 2, new CSS rule, background, home 2, 275 by 116, okay. 275, 116, float left, 0, 0, apply, okay, okay. Get rid of the text. Select the div, right arrow, and this is how it gets done. It can be a bit monotonous, but I can assure you it's much better than hand coding. Not to say there's anything wrong with hand coding, but I just like to have a visual control over what I'm doing. Same thing, we're just going to go through 135 by 116, 135 by 116, float left. I'm going to take you through the header, and then I'll probably pause the video and lay out the rest of the divs, because I think by then it should be pretty self-explanatory. Just highlight the div, over 1, insert, new div. And there is ways around this so that you don't have to create a div for each thing, but I like to do it that way because it gives me full control over everything. It makes it less confusing. If something goes wrong, it's less of a pain in the butt to correct. It's just, you know that everything's on its own div, and if some people disagree with that, then that's great, you know what I mean? Everybody has their own way of doing it, and this is definitely the way that I find works the best for me. Alright, getting sidetracked here. So we're down 4, 129, 116. Flip that left. dimensions on that. So that was 129, 116. So I think you should have a pretty good idea of what's going on here by now. And now you understand what I was talking about with the stacking order, you know, because if we had a div, if we had a slice in Photoshop that, you know, only came up to say right here, that just wouldn't work because it wouldn't line up correctly with everything else. Everything needs to flow one side to the other. It's very basic. Continuing 16, 129, 116. Almost. $31, $287. Oh, I messed that one up. Let's see. What did I do wrong there? I think I loaded the wrong image. Made a mistake there. That's okay. So the correct size is 163 by 116. There we go. Okay, so again, we're just going to go through here and continue this process all the way down until we get to the bottom. And once that's done, I'll come back and I'll show you how to how to create the rollover effect on the footer and how to add links to these tabs right here and this right here. Really basic stuff. Really quick, I'm just going to press F12. That's going to allow me to preview this in a browser. And there we go. For some reason it didn't center my div, but we'll correct that in just a minute. Alright, so I'll be back in just a moment. I've decided to just let the video keep running. Some people might be interested in watching, but I understand if you think it's completely boring. Alright, so here we've ran into a bit of an issue. It looks like that's the wrong div. I don't think it is. Let's check this out. Just gonna go in here. Okay, 35,287. When this happens, usually it means that something went wrong, obviously. It's probably because this div is a bit too wide. So I'm gonna decrease the size of this div by a couple pixels at a time until we get it in there correctly. So this is home 8, so I'm just gonna go into the home 8 on the CSS, go to box, and just decrease this by 1 pixel. See if that, there we go. See, I just lowered this box by 1 pixel and that allowed that to come up. It's usually something to do with that. Usually one of the divs is too wide when you get that issue. Where's home 2? My naming was horrible. I misnamed a bunch of things. 960 by 104. Alright. That's good. Yeah, I rushed when I named those. I probably should have taken a little bit more time. 32,268. Not a big deal though. I'm confident you guys will understand what's going on by this point. Okay. Once you do this a few times, it's pretty. You really get a good idea of how this works. It's really the best way to learn anything, I think, is just to do it. the issue where this div's popping down, so I'm going to put this div, which is 114, and I'm just going to make it 1 pixel smaller. Still didn't get it. Okay, that's going to cause an issue. It's probably this div. And these are issues that happen when your slices aren't correctly laid out, like I was talking about in Photoshop. There we go. Just made that 1 pixel less wide, I guess you would say, for lack of better pronunciation, and that's better. Getting there. Like I said, you only really have to do this once, because once I get everything laid out, I would use this as a template, and then on the next pages, you know, for the advertiser page, for the publisher page, I would just alter these middle divs and make it much easier for myself. Sometimes it is better to just do every single page from hand, as long as you don't have, you know, 50 pages on your site, and that way you really make sure everything is 100% accurate and you don't have any issues. It's completely up to you, though. Nine 60/31. same issue again. Should make it a little bit skinnier. And the last div. Oh, that doesn't look right now, does it? 960 by 41. Oh. For that doesn't come out the way it looks like it's going to. Oh. Okay. And that's it. We've laid out all of our divs in a matter of about 10 to 15 minutes. Okay. And these are all background images, okay? So, you know, if we wanted to be able to just put regular, you know, editable text in here, all we would do is we would go into Photoshop, you know, turn off the text for that section, and then we would just export that one PNG again with the same name and save it out, and then that would automatically update within Dreamweaver, and then you would be able to directly put your text in there. And that's the reason why when I slice this, I made this one slice and I made this one div for that very reason, so that I could edit this with text down the road if I wanted to. Same thing with this one. If I wanted to edit this with text, this is just a background image. Okay. Not images, but background images. Okay, so we've got all that laid out. Let's have a look at it. F12. And that's what it looks like. Looks pretty straightforward, right? Okay, let's keep going here. Okay. And basically all we would do to create our rollovers is right now we're using background images for these buttons, and we actually want to use images themselves. So what we're going to do is just select this div, which is home 18. And I'm just going to get rid of that. Click apply. Just going to go through. Just get rid of the background images for all those buttons. Okay, now all we would do let's see. This is number 18. So we're going to start with image 18. Just going to click it, drag it over, make sure that little cursor is at the very beginning. Stick it in there. 19. Okay. I'm just going to select this image. I'm going to bring up the JavaScript behaviors, and with that selected, I'm going to click Add. And we're going to create a swap image, and set to source is going to be our over button, which is this one. And click OK. Second one, same thing. Add a behavior, swap image, browse for source, 19. mouse button. Contact. And that's pretty much it. Now we want to make sure they're linked. That's what we would do. We don't have anything to link them to right now because all we've got is our home. We would just, for instance, just put in a index.html. And this is something that always messes people up, is when you add a link to it, it automatically messes everything up. And that's just because you just got to go in and add it. Make sure that the border is set to 0. Hit enter. Index.html border 0. I'm just linking all these to the index because we're not going to create all these pages. That's pretty much it. Press F12 to take a look at it, and it works great. Okay, so that's pretty much it. That's the quickest method that I know on how to take your layouts in Photoshop and get them into Dreamweaver very quickly. I mean, I think that you can certainly use this technique to apply it to your own designs, and hopefully it helps you out. Real quickly, let's take a look at this finished what this looks like when we're all done. This was all done with Photoshop and Dreamweaver. Okay. There's our buttons that we made. Pretty straightforward. All done with just Photoshop and Dreamweaver in about 2 hours. So that's about it. Thanks for watching. My name is Craig Webb. This tutorial was done for photoshopease.com. Check us out, and I hope this helps everybody. Take care.